Jonathan.
Another opportunity for us to chat about some great stuff that's going on at reInvent. It continues to be overwhelming with all of the activity and spreading out over a couple of weeks. But I really wanted to sit down and chat a little bit about this leadership session that we heard from Steve Schmidt on kind of security, identity, and compliance, which is obviously a hot topic for us and for our customers. But I thought we'd just react a little bit. And a quick reminder to everybody who's watching, my name is Jonathan McClure. I'm the CTO here at Mission. And this is Jarrett.
Jared Childs, Vice President of our Consulting Services Group, and really excited about this session. Earlier in my career, I led some security operations team and was an auditor and things like that. So I'm always super passionate about this security space and excited to hear all the things that are going on in AWS right now.
Indeed. And I definitely have a long history in this area as well, and sort of a love-hate relationship with compliance and running audits and things of that nature. So let's maybe start with some of the philosophy, because I think that was one of the things that really struck me is AWS tends to lead with their philosophy. This is who we are, and this is our view of the world. And it really ties into what we talked about last time about reinvention, right? I think AWS is really thinking about security, compliance, and identity now in this vision of how can we reinvent this? One of the quotes that he pulled out was from Mario Andretti, the famous race car driver. And he said, if everything seems under control, you're not going fast enough, which I thought was a very, if you told me that someone was going to open up a conversation with security professionals and compliance professionals with, if you're not going fast enough, you're not going fast enough, I would have told you, I would have laughed, right? And said, that's crazy. But that's exactly what they did.
That's right. And, I think with AWS specifically, it's interesting because we're a long ways into this game now. We could say we're still scratching the surface on one hand, but at the same time, security has long been one of the primary blockers for adoption of the cloud, right? You had a gap in the skills market, and then you had security challenges. Those were always like back and forth, the top two things. And so finding that balance, being able to go fast and gain all those benefits, how do you get the auditors comfortable? How do you solve the compliance problems and help your operations teams? It seemed like it was a big part of the theme today.
Yeah. And there was another quote that he said, he was talking about a culture of optimism and accountability. And that really relates exactly what you're talking about, right? Okay, so there's this fear of the cloud for many, many years from a security and compliance perspective. And now it's not about, let's be optimistic about this. Let's be accountable to it. Let's use the tools, remove the friction.
So. Yeah, the optimism, it's interesting. We were talking about this earlier, and, there's a couple different ways that you could have interpreted that possibly, because I was also thinking about the pessimism and cloud adoption, but then there's also just the optimism in general around security and the culture right now. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of brand damage that companies have gone through. And I think that had created, it probably stifled innovation a lot for a little while. But, there was some immature stages where people were moving fast and adopting cloud, didn't really know what they were doing. Maybe the tools weren't as robust and mature at that time. And so now, I think we're in a much better place. And it's a time where we should be optimistic about what benefits that the cloud can bring and how much security you can actually bake into your application sets leveraging the cloud.
Yeah, for sure. And they really were talking about in this notion of reinvention and sort of the optimism, it's all about this friction reduction, which I think, if you look at some of the core areas that they were diving into, cost was a big one they talked about, centralization and kind of giving you visibility was another one, and then automation. So those to me were the kind of three big ones. And on the cost front, one of the big ones was, they're talking about an 80% cost reduction to Macy, which I know that when we talk to our customers about implementing Macy, that's one of the big concerns that always pops up is, how much is this going to cost, right? And making it much more affordable is reducing a friction point.
Yeah, cost specifically as it pertains to security, I think is a really interesting topic. And, a lot of the items that they announced today, many of them were actually free. You can just leverage these tools. In the old data center days, one of the terms that I had heard coined for a while was there was the security poverty line. It costed so much to get a baseline set of security that enabled you to meet certain compliance regimes and things like that, that it was prohibitive for certain people.
Yeah,
and so their ability to do this and to drop that barrier means that security is now more widely available to everybody through cloud adoption.
Agreed. And yeah, I completely agree. And I think the interesting thing there is the costs now come in your time and your expertise and the investment you can make. into making those things happen, which is actually, again, great news for us as a partner, because that's what we do. We help companies adopt these tools, especially when they're free, like native tools provided with AWS. Once you get them implemented and we help you, get trained and get those things enabled in your environment, boom, off you're running, right?
That's right. The
So
tool may be free, but the expertise and the time it takes to implement are not free. And the ability to do that stuff efficiently can drive costs. So that's where you need strong partners.
Yeah, exactly. And it does relate to our NDR service that we have, which managed detection and response, which we developed in concert with Alert Logic, right?
Mm-hmm.
The big benefit there, we always tell people, is like, Alert Logic, the tool is great, but what you're really getting is you're getting our 24/7 team and their 24/7 team working together to respond, right? And so while it is really important that these tools are free from AWS, and we should turn them on in all of our environments, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if you're not acting on it. And so that it kind of pushes it down where you don't have an excuse. It's not about the tools anymore. It's
That's
about
right.
everything else. Right?
And what Alert Logic offers specifically, I think it's very complementary to a lot of the things that they announced today. So there's
I think so too.
really good synergy there.
Yeah, I was excited about that as well. We're not getting what do they say in the Apple world, Sherlocked, right? Where somebody invent a product that decimates one of our services. It's actually highly complementary. I think it's going to be really cool. So the second area that I brought up was centralization, and I think it's been really interesting. Like, one of the things that Mission has been doing over the past couple of years is evolving our kind of AWS account structuring and really leveraging AWS organizations and helping our customers leverage AWS organizations, helping them with sort of the substrate, the infrastructure of your infrastructure, things like control tower and provisioning. That was a big theme as well here.
Yeah, the lots of complementary things discussed on the organization side, and I think you're going to go into this, but just everything is all wired for automation now, and that's a big part of it too. Just the amount of time that you spend trying to plug all these things together, trying to manually audit things, and we're trying to reduce that bar. So when you talk about simplifying for everybody, they hit on a bunch of things, even as far as helping enable auditors, helping them understand the differences in cloud and on-premise. In AWS specifics, they spend a lot of time talking about that. It's all removing friction. You centralize more tools that enable you to automate as well. It reduces all that friction and helps that adoption as well.
Yeah, and you brought up this on the centralization front. Security Hub went GA, which I think is wonderful, and it's awesome. Very well integrated with everything else. And that's really a kind of a critical factor. Is if you are trying to provide a centralized hub, it needs to be integrated with everything. And they've opened it up to third parties. There's so much that can go into Security Hub now, which is, again, very complementary. So you also brought up audits, and I mentioned that I have a very kind of love-hate relationship there. I know you've gone through SOC 2 and ISO and PCI and GDPR and all these compliance kind of issues in the past, and audits and such. It is just fraught with manual processes.
Oh my goodness.
Documentation, producing documentation and evidence, and it's just exhausting. And honestly, it's one of those things that I think a normal human being who isn't me would not get super excited by audit manager, but I'm like, yes, bring it on. We need this. Yeah,
producing evidence. I mean, you mentioned that piece. Like, most people underestimate how much time goes into producing all the evidence that you need. And when you have tools that help do that for you from the full life chain, I mean, it simplifies so much.
Well, and it's a change in philosophy too, right? Like the old way was once a year big bang approach to the problem, where you go and you just generate an absolute mountain of documentation and you throw it at your auditor and say, good luck, right? And they mentioned that, right? It's it is an enormous amount of work. It's very manual. It's spreadsheets. And it sucks. It's not fun. But with something like Audit Manager, it shifts your mindset from once a year big bang approach to continuous access controls, continuous compliance, continuous risk assessment, which is it's the mode that they've been advocating for years and years. But this is just another piece of the puzzle and another way for us to continue to drive customers towards that, and ourselves, right?
That's right.
And he also talked about automation and visibility around patching, right? Which this is one of the best quotes in the whole thing, and I don't want to mess it up. What did he say? He said,
security vegetables.
Security vegetables, right? You got to eat your vegetables. You got to patch at scale. And if you're not using Systems Manager, that is a huge thing that we use. We have our managed service, Mission Cloud One, where we're actually managing your environment, your AWS environment. we help you manage patches, and we use SSM to do that because it's excellent at what it does. Well, now it's integrated into Security Hub, and you can get all that visibility in one place. Have I eaten my security vegetables for the day, or for the week or the month or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, and as this ties back in, when you talk about continuous monitoring, actually being able to develop roles, even for your internal audit teams, if you have those, and they can just in real time keep track of all this.
Yeah.
It's perfectly seamless.
I will say I'm very interested in, on the audit manager front, they said the built-in compliance frameworks they have today are like pretty basic ones. So it's the CIS kind of AWS Foundations benchmark, which is a great one. We run it for customers all the time. It's very useful. GDPR is a big one. I actually think that one is extremely valuable. Same with PCI DSS. But what I didn't hear was SOC 2. I didn't hear ISO 27001. I didn't hear High Trust. I didn't hear HIPAA. And I think a lot of these sort of compliance frameworks and they're going to need to be part of this as well. And I think they will be over time. But
I was trying to look back through some of my notes and find it. But I mean, the thing to consider too, when you're looking at this, if you're trying to run your own data center or something along those lines, and you have to take all of these different compliance regimes on and take them on yourself and figure it out, you got to keep in mind the scale that AWS is operating in. Like, who has more money to invest in their data centers and their security and making sure that their products are at least compatible with all these compliance regimes? I mean, there's a scale thing there that's just it's unstoppable.
Yet again, an undifferentiated heavy lifting. That's what AWS loves to attack, and now they're doing it on the security front, which they've been doing, but even more so. Well, good stuff. Yeah, that was a jam-packed kind of session, and I think there's a lot of other announcements that were in there that were kind of, I would say, in the weeds and sort of interesting. And I encourage everybody who's listening to go and check those out. But thematically, I think that the philosophy that AWS is pushing, the reinvention of security, zero trust, really driving for agility, speed, optimism, and accountability, leaning into removing friction from a cost, centralization, and automation perspective. I think it was really interesting.
You nailed it. I mean, there were tons of product announcements, but what I really appreciated about this was how they were able to weave it back into best practices and talk about trends and things like that. Zero trust is a good one too. It's been around for a long time, and just simple conversations around like, hey, if you have two systems that don't need to communicate together, why would you have that lateral network path? Really basic things we've been talking about for decades now, but it's still prevalent. And so what's important is developing tools that help automate and analyzing and seeing those scenarios between identity and access management profiles, network paths. The more that you remove the complexity in identifying those things, the easier it is to follow a true zero trust architecture.
For sure. Yeah, I feel like AWS is really breaking out the sandpaper, right? They're smoothing off all the rough edges and making everything easier for us. So pretty exciting stuff. Well, I think that's a good summary for the day and a great reaction to this particular session, and look forward to a couple more as we keep on going through reInvent.
It's been fun. Y'all track along with us.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.